her early years as leader, she'd do more battle with these colleagues, whom she called the Wets, than with anyone else.
Angus, hello, in you go. Any particular? I'll bring you all out in a moment.
Not put yourself in its hands, please.
Oh, I had that question on the phone in yesterday. I'm sorry you didn't listen to the answer. No, can't be everywhere, no, but you can listen.
I think she found him old womanly. She liked her men to be very masculine, handsome types. And he was rather pernickety and rather fussy, and of course he was a lawyer, and he found points of disagreement in everything, and she obviously found that very frustrating.
There you are, you see how diplomatic he is. Good morning. Careful!
An obituary paper as a hypocrisy.
And it's all voluntary, dear. Are you prepared to give something to it? Because I will.
Her mission was clear.
I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
She used to lecture ministers from time to time. They hadn't done their boxes. She said, I know you haven't all done your boxes. And she always did them. Her control of detail, the master of detail, was quite remarkable. Some people said she was too involved in detail. But on the other hand, it gave her considerable power. And when you looked at her, looking at her papers, she'd turn them over, and always on the last page there'd be underlinings in the yellow and green pen. She really had done her homework, sitting up late at night.
From the start, Margaret Thatcher loved the busy life at number 10. It wasn't her first experience of living above the shop, and she was impatient as always to get on, driving herself with relentless purpose.
She only needed a very few hours sleep a night, and it was amazing. I mean, I got up quite early in the morning to do the boxes, and when you were abroad, you were sitting in a room and got up at 6 in the morning. There she was, perfectly dressed, perfectly made up. Beautiful hair all tidy and everything, doing her boxes. Probably been doing them for about an hour before I got up. Maddening.
She had a remarkable combination of factors. She was very smart. She believed in herself. She believed that she was on a mission. She had a lot of ambition. She was born with brains, but also she was born with the physical and mental energy to achieve those ambitions.
And warned that Britain had been a soft touch for too long.
We weren't getting a fair deal on the budget, and I wasn't going to have it. There's a great stand of equity and fairness in the British people. This is our characteristic. There's not a stand of equity or fairness in Europe. It's they're out to get as much as they can. That's one of those enormous differences. So I tackled it on that basis, because if things went on as they were, we were going to pay the largest single contribution to Europe of the lot.
The Prime Minister demanded that the community should give Britain a £1 billion rebate and refused to countenance a penny less. The 1979 Dublin summit exposed the stunned European leaders to the full force of the Thatcher negotiating style.
It's that £1,000 million on which we started to negotiate, because we want the greater part back. But it's not asking the community for money. It is asking the community to have our own money back.
And she set out in 1979 what she had to have, and she finally got it in 1984. And in the intervening 5 years, she made the life of her European colleagues utter misery by raising at every single head of government meeting.
Jonathan Smith has always been most understanding about this problem.
And she went on and on and on until she got it.
Come up with an easy solution. But I'm constantly asking my colleagues to think of it in this way.
Well, she was quite right, but they were intensely irritated.
There are several council meetings, both of finance ministers and...
But if she'd not been very strident about it, I don't think she would have got her money back. And it was sometimes quite embarrassing.
One thing she had greater quantity than anybody who worked with her was she had willpower, she had courage, she was almost blind to danger, and she did have convictions.
All attempts to destroy democracy by terrorism will fail.
miners' union, led by Scargill, thought that violence was going to intimidate the Prime Minister. They made a very wrong decision indeed.
There are those who are using violence and intimidation to impose their will on others who do not want it. And it must not succeed. It must not succeed.
Mrs. Thatcher's strategy was getting results. 4 other hostages were released over the next few days. On day 6, the gunmen killed Embassy Press Attaché Lavasani. Mrs. Thatcher sent in the SAS. It was the first time this shadowy elite group had been seen on the streets of London. Five of the 6 hostage takers were killed. All but 1 of the remaining hostages were rescued alive.
She had the vision to see what needed doing. She had the courage to take advice, and she backed the people who were carrying out her instructions.
There is a white flag.
Mrs. Thatcher's bold decision to send in the SAS marked her out as a special kind of leader, a politician with backbone.
No one, thank heavens, is quite like anyone else, however much the socialists may pretend otherwise. And we believe that everyone has the right to be unequal. But to us, every human being is equally important. A man's right to work as he will, to spend what he earns, to own property, to have the state as servant and not as master. They are the essence of a free economy. And on that freedom, all our other freedoms depend.
Of hard work and thrift were at the heart of the Roberts family life.
Many's the time I can remember my mother saying when I said, oh, my friends have got more. But we're not situated like that. One kicked against it. Of course one kicked against it. They had more things than we did.
She often mentioned arguing with her parents' customers across the counter of the corner shop in Grantham. And as I tell so many people, I say, I can just hear those customers saying, a proper little madam, that one.
Oh, yes, we argued, and we were taught to argue. This was part of it. Yes, never forget, you must make up your own mind. You must learn to examine things. You must learn to think about them. Oh, yes, we were taught to argue, and we did.
At her all-girls grammar school, Margaret enjoyed the regimented life. She was remembered as a hard-working and clever girl with a precocious interest in politics.
We had always each term one important speaker to give a lecture. And Margaret, when it came to questions, unlike most of her age, who would say nothing and look very shy, she would stand up and say, does the speaker think such and such a thing? In the most, almost parliamentary language. That I noticed. And you can imagine schoolgirls aren't always very pleased with people who do that sort of thing at the age of 14.
I remember my father sometimes saying to me, if I said, oh, so-and-so was doing something, can't I do it too? You know, children don't like to be different. And him being very stern, you make up your own mind what you're going to do. Never because someone else is doing it. And he was always very stern about that. It stood one in good stead.
Margaret Thatcher regarded her patrician colleagues as typical of the feckless English upper classes. She called them the not-so-grand grandees, and suspected that they mistrusted her both as a woman, that woman as some called her, and as a lower middle-class woman to boot.
Yes, well, I know that some of them described me as that woman. Did it matter what they called me, so long as I got the job done? I mean, to me, they were those grandees, or they just don't know what life is like. They haven't been through it. And eventually, if they didn't help our cause, they had to go. But it didn't bother me too much that they were a little bit patronizing like that. Frankly, the people who are the true gentlemen deal with others for what they are, not for who their father was. Let's face it, maybe it took that woman to get things done, and the real reason why they said it, because they knew they just hadn't got it with to see things through.